Hi, so we are going to continue for factors of international banking growth. Okay, number 6 is about banking regulations. Okay, so banking regulations is actually originates from the microeconomic spheres over the ability of bank depositors to monitor the risk of originating on the lending side, and from micro and macroeconomic concerns over the stability of the banking system in the case of a bank crisis. So it means that whatever the regulations that the bank have rules out, okay, it does come from the fears over the power of the bank depositors. Okay, sometimes the bank depositors also concerns and quite worried about how banks are going to spend their money, right? How banks are going to use the money that they have deposited in that bank. Okay, so if the banks are too eager to giving loans and so on, despite the current economic conditions, so this will become a major concern that's happening in among the bank depositors. Okay, so to erase the worries from these bank depositors, of course, banks may actually rules out some regulations to protect their bank depositors, right? And these worries also come from the macroeconomic concerns over the stability of banking system in the case of a bank crisis. So if anything happens to the bank or the economic of the country, of course, this will affect the banking system. So there are some regulations that they actually can follow. These regulations may come in terms of such as how much that statutory reserve requirements that they need to maintain, right? How much loans actually they can provide to the customers and so on. So in addition to statutory and administrative regulatory provisions, the banking sector has been subject to practice informal regulation. At the same time, however, banking sektor juga walaupun dalam masa yang sama terpaksa follow the rules and regulatory provisions that they have, in the same time, okay, mereka juga tertakluk kepada informal regulation yang ada di dalam sesuatu countries, kan? So such as if they are doing business, they are actually from a kind of non-Islamic country, for example. So if they are operating in an Islamic country, of course, the way that they actually conduct their product will be a kind of difference. Right, so different. So agak berbeza bila mereka datang ke negara yang of course seperti datang ke Malaysia, for example. So if let's say that bank is coming from Europe, okay, so beroperasi di Malaysia, of course mereka perlu mematuhi beberapa perkara tertentu, terutamanya berkait dengan produk-produk yang syariah compliance. Okay, dan juga mereka perlu follow apa saja informal practice yang ada di negara kita, right? So that's what does it mean. Walaupun perkara itu mungkin tidak ada dalam peraturan dan sebagainya, so what are the informal practice yang ada di sini, mereka juga haruslah follow dan ikut supaya it's easier for them to continue operating. So the banking regulations also stated that while even though sometimes government uses its own discretion, so outside formalized legislation to influence banking sectors, operations or outcome. Yes. So whatever the banks are doing, they are actually subject to the government's regulations. So sometimes the government uses its own discretions uh, uh, to help these banks continue to operate in their countries. So outside formalized legislation, tidak menggunakan peraturan-peraturan yang termaktub di dalam undang-undang dan sebagainya, but the government has a kind of influence lah, boleh mempengaruhi apa saja aktiviti yang dilakukan oleh multinational banks ni. Okay. Sama seperti dalam insurance industry. Kalau if you still remember, previously like Prudentials is come from Europe, right? Prudentials. So in order for them to start the business here, the government has stated that Prudential can actually start the business over here, but they must collaborate with the local bank. So that's why they are collaborating with BSN and provide and introduce their Prudential BSN Takaful product, right? So this is what does it mean, how the government actually use their own discretion, use their influence. So of course there are some seolah-olah seperti bersyarat lah, memberi syarat ataupun a few conditions, walaupun ianya tidak termaktub dalam perundangan secara rasmi, tetapi pihak government mampu untuk menarik bank-bank tersebut ataupun these foreign companies untuk beroperasi di dalam negara dengan syarat-syarat yang tertentu, kan? Okay. So however, multinational banks are often not subject to the same regulation as domestic banks. So these banks kadang-kadang tidak perlu mematuhi perundangan ataupun regulation sama seperti local bank yang ada di negara tersebut. So there may be a reduction in need to publish adequate financial information, lack of required deposit insurance and reserve requirements on foreign currency deposits, and the absence of regional restrictions. So for example, the US bank may not be restricted to the state of the origin. Correct. So the regulations that might be different compared to the local domestic bank that they have if they are operating in a foreign country. Yes. So sometimes they are not required to maintain certain required deposit insurance such as the local bank does. Okay, like in Malaysia, if the local banks, they are subject to PIDM, right? Kan? So local banks normally they have PIDM, so that this will protect the customers' deposit, right? And some reserve requirements. So this multinational bank may not be subject to put or if they have the reserve requirements on foreign currency deposit, but for foreign or multinational banks, this reserve requirement may be not at a higher percentage levels. Okay, might be reduced for them. And the absence of regional restrictions in the US, such as the absence of regional restrictions seperti US Bank mungkin tidak tertakluk untuk membuat atau mengikuti beberapa perkara tertentu, tidak sama seperti negara apa yang berlaku di negara asal mereka, right? So mungkin di negara asal mereka ada beberapa orang kata regional restriction lah. from one states to another, of course there will be different rules. Okay, but if they are operating in Malaysia, they may not be subject to this kind of rules. Okay, so, normally di Malaysia peraturannya agak sama saja daripada one state to another. Okay, so multinational advantage. Number 7, the factors of international banking growth is because of the multinational advantage. So every ultimate goal of every for-profit businesses, or we call it profit organization, is to sell more products and services to bring in more revenue and generate more income for the owner or investors. Yes, so multinational banks also the same. So they are actually try to sell more products, to give more products, to gain more profits and revenues. Okay, so bank follows their multinational customers abroad to prevent the erosion of their client to foreign banks seeking to service the multinational foreign subsidiaries. So sometimes these banks will actually operating abroad, operating overseas, supaya mereka tidak kehilangan klien-klien yang normally deals dengan mereka di negara asal. Okay, dan kadang-kadang this foreign banks, mereka cuba follow apa yang Citibank buat, Standard Chartered buat. Okay, so HSBC done kan, so this their kind of product. So this bank supaya mereka tidak kehilangan clients in terms of the same product, so they were also moving abroad. Mereka juga pindah operasi mereka ke luar negara supaya mereka dapat offer benda yang sama. Okay, so multinational banks prevent erosion by foreign banks of the travelers check, tourists and foreign business market. So mereka cuba menghalang lah. Okay, erosion means here adalah pengurangan ataupun reduction lah, ataupun almost like erasement, penghapusan. Maknanya and this erosion means the meaning is like pengurangan lah, kan? So the erosion we can say as also like decrease, kan? So untuk menghalang their services, okay, from decreasing and so on. Okay, such as in terms of the use of the travelers check, the tourists and foreign business market. So that is why multinational banks are trying to move abroad. Okay, so that their services that they could offer also can be expand abroad. So this is let's say if they are actually originating from US. So if any of the US citizens traveling abroad, they also can use the same products such as the travelers check that they have from the particular banks abroad, something like that. Okay, and for this multinational advantage, a firm that has operations in many countries can set up its production operations in developing countries to take advantage of cheap labor and then sell products in developed countries. So yeah, sometimes these banks also follows what are the multinational companies doing, such as they move their base, they move their operations to the developing countries first, such as in Malaysia, in Vietnam, in China, right? These are the reason is to take the advantage of the cheap labor costs and then sell their products back in the developed countries. All right, so this is a kind of what are they doing right now. Okay, so so there is for factor number 7, multinational advantages. So these are the kinds of factors why they are moving the banks abroad.